Hello, and welcome to the Spot the Fat in Your Snack Lipids Lab. In this lab, we will be trying to get the grease spots out of potato chips, otherwise known as the lipids in the potato chips. Now, lipids are in every single human being, and they're typically located in the brain, cell membranes, cholesterol, or even the blood cells. Lipids come in many different groups, and some of the groups would be fats and oils, phospholipids, steroids, carotenoids, or waxes. The first research towards lipids took place in the 1800s by a French scientist named Michel Chevreul. He was a lab assistant back in the time, and actually he didn't really know what he was working with until many years later, when the research was then uncovered and more closely looked into. My hypothesis for this lab would be that the grease stain on the regular potato chips would be much larger than the grease stain in the reduced fat potato chips. The dependent variable will be the size of the grease stain that we uncover, and the independent variable will be the type of potato chip we are using in this experiment. So before you begin this lab, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take a graph paper, and you want to cut this 7 by 5 inches. Okay, so you want to take a piece of graph paper and cut it 7 by 5 inches, and then you're going to want to take a piece of wax paper and cut it so that it is slightly larger than the piece of graph paper. All right, and you're also going to take a piece of paper. Now you're going to repeat those same steps with a separate piece of graph paper, wax paper, and then put the regular paper on top. And then you're going to take each of those separate piles of your cut papers, and you're going to label one pile reduced fat chips and the other pile regular chips. All right, and now you are set up. Now what you need to do for your lab is you need to weigh the amount of chips that you have by 28 grams or 1 ounce. So here I can see I have 28 grams worth of the regular potato chips, and now all I need to do is also measure the reduced fat potato chips. So now I've set my regular potato chips to the side, and I began to measure the reduced fat potato chips. Now I've put all of my reduced fat potato chips here, and I have 28 grams worth of reduced fat potato chips. So now I have everything set up, and I'm officially ready to begin the lab. So to first start this lab, the first thing I did was I washed my hands and I thoroughly dried them. So now what we are going to do is we are going to take a regular potato chip out of the bag. Alright, so we have a potato chip right here, and we're just going to examine it to see if it looks somewhat greasy. From what I can tell, I think I might be able to see a little bit of a grease spot on it. Maybe right, I don't know if you can see that, but right here a little bit. But I can't really tell right now. So now what we're going to do is we are going to crumble it with my fingers, and then examine how my fingers look and how they feel after I've crumbled a potato chip. So I'm just gonna crumble like that. And then I'm going to put these in the other hand, and I'm going to look at my my hand. My hand right now looks very, very greasy. Looks almost shiny, from what I can tell. And when I rub my hands together, it's like slippery. It's kind of like a little bit feels like slimy almost. Yeah. And I can tell that there's definitely a lot of grease on my fingers right now. So now, after examining the regular potato chip and to see how greasy it was, I have thoroughly washed and dried my hands. And now I'm ready to compare results to the reduced fat potato chips. So we're going to take a chip out of the bag here, and we're just going to examine it. From what I can see, really does not look greasy at all, really. A little bit maybe here, I could say. Like, I don't know if you can see, but I'm not sure if you can see, but right there it looks a little greasy. But overall, it does not look greasy at all. So we are going to crumble it up here. And now we're going to see. See, well, my hands are a little greasy. I can tell definitely they are a little shiny compared. But when we compare it to the regular potato chips, it's really not as big of a deal. I mean, the regular potato chips, you could see my hand was shiny, like very shiny. This, however, I mean, I can tell it's a little greasy when I'm closely examining it, but I don't think a normal person or anyone looking at a distance would be able to see that my hand is greasy right now. So now, once again, I have thoroughly washed and dried my hands, and now we're ready to take the next step. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the piece of the sheet of paper labeled regular chips, and we're going to place it down. We will then place the graph paper labeled regular chips and place it directly on top of that sheet of paper. Now that we've done this, we can take the pile of regular chips that we originally prepared and weighed that were 28 grams, and we can spread them over the graph paper evenly so that the whole graph paper is covered with chips. So we can just go that. And then, yeah, so we just want the whole graph paper to be covered with regular potato chips, not the reduced fat ones. And then what we're going to do actually is we're going to put the wax paper over it, and we are going to try to crush them. So we're just going to spread some more out, make sure all the potato chips get on the graph paper. Overall, make sure that, and we need to make sure that they're it's completely covered with potato chips. We can't have one spot having most of the potato chips. All right, so now that we have done this, I'm going to take the piece of wax paper that, I don't know if you can see, but I did label it regular chips, and we are going to put it over this. All right, and now the next step we would be to crush these. All right, so now that we have everything set up, we are going to begin to crush the regular chips. All right, so we're gonna place our hand down, right, and we're gonna try to keep it evenly spread out across the graph paper, although that may be a little hard to do. Just gonna crush it slowly with our hands. We don't want to make a big mess because we need to have these. Overall, we need to have it mostly spread out onto the graph paper. We don't want it anywhere else for the most part. So I can see, I think overall I've got a lot of alright, I have a lot crushed. I'm going to actually begin to take a rolling pin now, and I'm just gonna roll. Again, I want to keep it on the graph paper, although it's a little hard. Alright, so we're just gonna keep rolling. Maybe, 3 or 4 more times just to make sure that everything is broken. Alright, so we see this is falling a little bit here. And then we'll do one more time. And now we have crushed the regular chips, and we've made sure to at least try to hold them onto the graph paper. So now that we have crushed the regular chips, we are just going to let them sit on the graph paper for about another minute, and at the end of it we will throw the potato chips away, and we will examine what happened to the graph paper and if there's a big grease stain or not. So now that I have properly disposed of the wax paper and the crushed potato chips on my sheet of graph paper, I can now actually examine the grease spots that were left by the potato chips. All right, so now you can see a little bit on the paper were left because I couldn't all keep them on the graph paper. But overall, on the graph paper, I can see, there are very large grease stains, actually larger than I was expecting. We can see up here we have like this big grease stain right here. I don't know if you are able to see this, but you have one right here, this huge one, and then you see one in the corner, the bottom left corner here is another huge one. Overall, the bottom right corner wasn't actually affected that much by the by the potato chips, and the top left corner was, you know, you can see a little bit, but not like the far one. It's not. You see. There's two extremes right here. It would be probably around like the middle, and then the bottom left, or where there are these huge grease stains. So I've now actually taped the piece of graph paper to the window, and I need to wait another 10 minutes before completely examining it. But you can already see, you know, you see these white stains right here. That is actually the grease coming through. So, you know, you can see what I was saying, like the middle and then the bottom left were huge areas for the grease. And now we can go to the regular chips, the sheet of paper that was underneath the graph paper, right? And we can see this stuff isn't necessarily accurate because some of the chips did fall. But even you can see, like, you have this big grease stain right here and another one right here. You know, you see these two. That's actually, like, that leaked through the graph paper, actually. So, you know, that just shows how much grease there really was in these regular potato chips. So now, once again, I've thoroughly washed and dried my hands, and I'm ready to begin the second part of the experiment, which is basically just doing the same thing, but to reduce fat chips. All right, so we have our regular sheet of paper here. We have our piece of graph paper. And now we can just begin to put the potato chips, the reduced ones, spread them out evenly across the graph paper so that no spots are left. We can see, you know, it's a little, it's a little different though, because shockingly, actually, I would say there were probably a little less reduced fat potato chips for the 28 gram measurement than there were regular potato chips. But anyway, we're just gonna continue to spread these here, make sure that no spots are left. Maybe adjust my graph paper a little bit, and then, you know, just keep putting them on. And now that we're completed with this, we can put our wax paper on top of it, and we can start to crush them. So now that we have actually placed everything down, we can begin to crush. All right, so I'm going to go with my hands at first and just slowly crush everything down, making sure I don't want any to really go to the paper. I know that is probably going to be an impossible task, though. So just continue to crush, continue to make sure, you know, it's just spread out all over the graph paper. Still not completely crushed, I can tell. We're just gonna go a little bit, so yeah, and we're just gonna keep doing that. All right, I think I've crushed a lot with my hands, so I'm gonna start using the rolling pin now. Alright, so now I think I've crushed them to the point where I don't think I can crush much more with it being effective. So now I believe that we are ready for our next step. So now, once again, all we have to do is we need to wait a minute, make sure that it just sits here for a little bit, and then we can properly weigh the results and see what grease stain was left and how large it was. Alright, so now I have disposed of the wax paper and the potato chips, and I can examine the graph paper now. And I would say that the results here are shocking. I was expecting a little bit of grease. but I wasn't expecting like barely any. You know, we see, let me see, we can see a little right here, but they're dots. It's not, you know, we saw the regular potato chips and it was covered, like, it was like a huge smudge. This is really just dots here, just little, like, pen marks almost of grease. Really not a lot. Taped both pieces of graph paper to the window, and, you know, we can just tell by right here that the results are shocking. We see here almost covered. We have a few spots in the corners that aren't, but really just covered with grease. And this, on the other hand, like I was saying, like, really just pen marks, like little things all over the paper. Really not much of anything. We can look on the reduced fat chips, the paper, and we can see the graph paper was probably right about here. Nothing leaked through, no grease leaked through at all. You can see, you know, obviously, some chips got onto the regular sheet that weren't supposed to get there. But where the graph paper was, no grease leaked through at all. In our lab, I will compare the two nutrition labels on both packages of chips to see if these results that we have on the wall and on the window, if they make sense. Sorry, so we can look. These would be the reduced fat, and we can see 1 serving per container, 230 calories, and we can see total fat would be 6 grams, 8% of your daily value. Saturated fat would be 1 gram, which is 5% of your daily value. Polyunsaturated fat, 3.5 grams. Monounsaturated fat, 1.5 grams. And 0 grams of trans fat. Alright, so we can tell, 8%, it's a decent amount of fat, but not anything crazy. Alright, if we go to the regular potato chips, however, we have total fat for 1 serving. Keep in mind, this is less calories, so this is probably less chips as well. 10 grams, which is 13% of your daily value. Saturated fat, 1.5 grams, 7%, compared to we have 5% and 1 gram. Trans fat, again, 0 grams. And then if we look here on the whole package, we have 27 grams of fat, of total fat, which would be 34% of your daily value. That's 1/3 right there. And then we have 3.5 grams of saturated fat, which would again be 19% compared to what it was here, which would be 5%. So we can see, just looking at these nutrition labels right here, these two chips are very, very different when it comes to how many lipids they probably have and how many fats. Because we can see here, this has a lot more fat than, let's say, the reduced chips. And overall, in this lab, I would say that the results that we got here, which would be basically the whole paper covered in grease compared to, a few little dots, I would say that it does, I would say it matches the nutrition labels on the chip bags, because we can see here there's a vast difference between the fats on the reduced chips and the fat on the regular chips. So overall, I think these results make perfect sense, and I think it's very explainable, and I think that this is kind of what I was expecting, not to this extreme degree of the vast difference, but I was definitely expecting the regular chips to have more of a grease stain than the reduced fat chips.